Welcome back to another episode of Taking Inventory. This week, we're welcomed by Gabriel Ornelas, who is the host of On the Pass podcast, a top 100 food podcast where he talks to the movers, the shakers in the food, beverage, hospitality, travel industries. He's an expert just in the space. So, Gabriel, we're really excited that you're able to join the podcast today.
Absolutely. Excited to be here.
So, let's start with just On the Pass. I mean, this has been, it looks like a passion project for you. Like, how did you start it? How are you getting all these kind of experts and people in the space to join you? And like, what's the purpose of it?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your interest in the show. It's 100% a passion project. And I hope that is clear when listeners listen to an episode and see not only that they discover and learn and are entertained by these incredible guests, but also really hear my passion behind it. Because as you know, in podcasting, as much as there's incredible guests, the hosts really kind of help move the conversation. And this show has never been about me. It's always been about the guests. But I think people come back because of the deep passion that I have. So to answer your question, I've been in the food and beverage hospitality space for almost 15 years. I sort of fell into it. You know, I come from a very service-oriented family. My father was a peace officer. My mother worked in healthcare. And when they were not in service of others at work, they came back to the home and were in service of their friends, hosting dinner parties, hosting, little events, bringing people together. And so I didn't realize until later in life that's not always common. People don't grow up, exercising that muscle of being in service of others, of knowing how to take care of people in their home, of putting together an exceptional, memorable experience. And I think ultimately that leads into the brand work that I do and ultimately the podcast. So 2019, I just wrote something on LinkedIn recently. I called up a friend in October of 2019. He does music composition for film and television. And I said, I bought a mic on Amazon and I'm starting a podcast and I'm interviewing Danielle Ballud next week. And he's like, whoa, relax. Hold on. Like, you're starting at the top. He goes, do you even know how to utilize that mic? And I said, no, but I'm doing it anyway. And so he said to me, he goes, you know what? And he's a musician. He said, I'm going to learn how to do dialogue editing and I'm going to learn how to mix and master, because if you're going to do this, we need to do it right. And so he has been my partner since ultimately day one. But because of the work that I've done with brands and storytelling, I had kind of unprecedented access to chefs and restaurateurs and hoteliers and spirits executives. And so I just felt like a lot of this sort of bite-sized snackable content that we were doing for Instagram, Snap, like other things, it was great. But the more interesting conversations, the deeper learning of storytelling, of brand building happened over dinner, over lunch, or when we weren't filming. And so I just felt like I needed a platform that I could help really tell these stories. And so, the mission is really simple. It's to celebrate the diverse hospitality ecosystem. It's to be a vehicle for discovery, of learning, to create real community within the industry and without the industry, and really just have a positive impact on the world. And I know that's kind of like a big lofty goal, but I'm not interested in Schadenfreude as a strategy. I'm not interested in getting on and trying to poke a guest in a way that stimulates some sort of like tough conversations. I want to have real conversations. I want to have real authentic conversations, but I'm not interested in, I want to keep the positivity of the conversation moving forward.
And, it's interesting just I think for our listeners who don't, the most part, are like kind of at these, tech platforms, they like experience the hospitality industry as consumers of it, but they don't kind of like understand how big it is, the breadth of it. Can you kind of give us a sense of like the players in the space, like how big it is, and just sort of like, what's sort of the mindset of you're like someone on that end trying to build these brands and like kind of how competitive is it? Just, can you give us kind of a peek under the hood of how that world works?
It's a big question. It's a big question. But what I would say is food is culture, and you hear people say that. And I just released an episode yesterday with Dana Cowan, 20 years, former editor-in-chief of Food and Wine. She's had a breadth of a career, and we really talk about how food touches everything. You see on social media people saying food is politics, food is entertainment, food is. Whether you are as passionate about it as I am or not, the food industry has a profound effect on our lives. And it's something as simple as there are chefs that have created things 10, 15 years ago that are trickling down, and you're seeing them at your fast food chains or your fast casual chains. But, you hear things like, vote with your fork, vote with your dollar. But really, the political space, entertainment, culture, food touches everything. And, we're seeing individuals like Fariel, who's Marcus Samuelson's executive chef at Have and Mar, a restaurant in New York, getting her moment at the Met Gala because she cooked an incredible, there's no distinction. I don't look at food as one category and entertainment as one and film. I look at the full spectrum of it's just really culture. And we're all engaging with it oftentimes 3 or 4 times a day. And so I'm just so deeply passionate about the future of food, where things are going, conversations around the environment, around sustainability. How do we become better stewards of the environment? Because when you look at the plate, when you're eating and you look at the plate, I don't know if people are really thinking about where this comes from and how many hands this has touched, and the ingredients and the farmers and the marketing teams and the brand teams behind all of these. There's a whole world of influence that gets that plate to your dinner table. And a lot of people love saying, and it's true, we eat with our eyes first, and we do. And now I just had Alberto Landgraf on the podcast. He's number 47 on the world's 50 best restaurant list, 2 Michelin star restaurant in Rio de Janeiro called Otek. And he said, now because of social media, of TikTok, Instagram, Snap, other platforms, we're eating with our eyes every minute of every day. Now it used to just be when it hits our plate or it hits our table, but now we're constantly being inundated, whether you realize it or not. And so I highlight individuals who I believe are making a positive impact on the world. And, it could be like Chef Daniel Boulud, iconic chef, 4 decades, French chef who lives in New York, or someone, again, like Dana Cowan, or I just recently had food media leader Jamila Robinson, the new editor-in-chief of Bon Appetit and Epicurious, and how she's moving that behemoth of a media organization into the future with this vision of food culture is for everyone. I think food culture used to be for certain people. I think you have organizations like James Beard, World's 50 Best, other things that sadly years ago were too focused on one category, whether it was too focused on men or too focused on white men, and not really engaging a broader spectrum of individuals who are influencing food culture in such a profound way. And so I want to highlight the individuals that inspire me, because I believe they're going to inspire my listeners.
And in seeing, doing the podcast and talking to all these people, and again, this is just like me being naive, kind of just about like that world. But is it clear now that like there is this new sort of age of like these creators and influencers, and that like, it's sort of, maybe it's kind of like in the NBA, it's like LeBron has more followers than the NBA, right? Like he's bigger than like the league, kind of, in some ways. Is that happening kind of in the food industry where these chefs are becoming
100%? I think there's there's different categories of some of these influential tastemakers. Some of them are these Food Network stars that have sort of developed a career and a following through being on television. And it's obviously a brilliant way to capture an audience, to promote yourself. It's an amazing marketing tool. We've had several individuals like Piet Despain, who won Gordon Ramsay's first show, Next Level Chef, and she's gone on to do incredible collaborations and do other spotlights on television, and is developing her career. But you've got these sort of Food Network stars that have been in that ecosystem, that some of them have restaurants, some of them are just incredible TV chefs or hosts that do collaboration dinners and are doing brand deals. And obviously a big part of what you see in the culinary industry is a lot of these thought leaders end up doing a book. There are book tours, and that layers onto experiences, brand deals. You've got individuals like Citibank and Amex and Resi and these brands that want to capture sort of that audience and provide unique and exclusive experiences for their card members in partnership with some of these chefs. But then on the other hand, you've got the chefs that are tried and true sort of restaurateurs as well, who have a physical location, that have built this incredible audience by building community at 1, 2, 3, many physical locations. And then you have sort of the other individuals who are these YouTube, TikTok stars that for YouTube have been around for a while, but these individuals on TikTok that have absolutely, I'm not saying come out of nowhere, but in a very, very short period of time have built millions of followers and are affecting culture, I believe, in a really profound way. And not just doing the storytelling of this is what I'm making, which there is that content, but telling a deeper story about why their food is important, whether they're a Japanese chef or creator, or a Korean chef or creator, or a Latin chef or creator, and educating a wider audience about sort of their specific food, and engaging a really interesting, captivated listener and viewer who wants to learn more, and is just passionately curious about these different intersections within the food industry. So I think that's going to continue to happen. It's going to continue to evolve. There's other individuals, again, like myself. I would never call myself an influencer or a tastemaker necessarily, but I am a content creator who is trying to amplify the voices of these individuals, and just so happen to have built an audience myself as well. So you've got some of these podcast individuals who are capturing an audience, creating community, and really building upon deeper storytelling. Because I think a lot of the individuals that I've referenced, whether they're on shows or they're on TikTok or Instagram, I think the audience, at least pre-COVID or during COVID, there's been this movement towards sort of like shorter form. But I think I'm interested as a listener. I want to learn more about people. I'm interested in the human stories. And so that's why this hour format to sometimes hour and a half format for me is more interesting, because I like following people on Snap and Instagram and TikTok, but I kind of want to go deeper into why they do what they do. Why do they do what they do? Why are you waking up every day and putting your time into this particular product or craft? For me, as a consumer, that's interesting, because I think you can then dive into the stories of who these individuals are, why they do what they do, what made them that way, and really the lessons in building a brand ultimately, because all of these individuals are particular brands, and there's ebbs and flows and hills and valleys of how they ultimately got to this place. And it's not always pretty, and it's not always a straight path, as you guys know. And so I want to dig into those stories.
Within those stories, like do a lot of the chefs and content creators and restaurateurs, like, do they enter this because it's a passion and they want to create a great experience? Is it to get rich, right? If you're a content creator, and then over time, like, how do they balance the the relationships with brands with, I think, the pureness of what they're trying to accomplish. Like, how have you had those conversations with some of those folks?
We've had a lot of conversations with a number of individuals. I do remember a conversation with Sebastian Silvestri, CEO of Daniel Boulud's hospitality group called Dinex. And he said, this has to be a work of passion, because he said, if I really wanted to make money, I would have went into the tech industry, like a lot of your listeners. But having said that, someone like a Danielle or Sebastian, who have become celebrities in their own right, who get invited to the Oscars, get invited to doing, like, they have broke the barrier and bridged culture in a way that they're kind of very well known. They are very well known. They're iconic in nature, and they've been able to discover the world in a way that most people can't even dream of necessarily. You know, I have friends in finance and in the tech world that are always kind of like scratching their head, and they're like, how were you in Singapore? Like, what were you doing? Or how were you in Oporto in northern Portugal working with a port client? And I said, well, that's what I do. And they're like, oh, God, I wish I could take a holiday like that. I said, you can. You absolutely can. Give yourself permission to do that. But getting back to your question, I think 99.9% of these individuals, it's a work of passion. It has to be. You don't get up every day and try to create a particular product or service, whether it's a restaurant or it's a physical, wine product or a canned wine product, like our friend Kristen from Nomatica, to just get rich right away. Yeah. Some of them end up making a tremendous amount of money. And I would say even more important than the money, a tremendous amount of influence in their particular vertical of business. But it starts there with this deep passion, but then it has to be a viable business. And that's something that we are grappling with the restaurant industry, where consumers right now, I wouldn't say they're upset, but some people, I hear it all the time, complaining about prices. But if you're going to complain about prices, which is fine, you have every right to do that, you also need to maybe be educated and do your due diligence on the cost of goods as well, and how the cost of particular ingredients, products have gone up as well. So if you're going to look at one spectrum, you better also be educated and understand the other spectrum. And I think that's what's so challenging, specifically talking about the restaurant industry, is it's historically a very low margin business. But let's think about, guys, the profound effect that restaurants and bars and coffee shops have on a community. They're these community centers that bring people together. And that's sort of priceless in a lot of ways as well. And so we need for these individuals to be a viable business. There's nothing wrong with a chef or restaurateur or an amazing barista who opens up a coffee shop that has a profound effect on a community in a lot of ways. There's nothing wrong with them being deeply passionate about what they're doing, but also wanting to make money as well. They should be able to make money. There's nothing wrong with it. I feel like in the past, I had Shep Gordon, who you guys may know. He's known as the Supermensch. Mike Myers did a documentary that won Sundance Film Festival, I believe in 2013 or 2014, called The Legend of Shep Gordon, Supermensch. And he talks about the early days where, by the way, this is still happening sometimes this day, where Wolfgang Puck had to fly himself to places. Nobody helped him. Nobody paid for anything. He's paying out of his own pocket. We ask these chefs and these creators to do a lot for free. And a lot of brands ask them to do a lot for free, to be a part of a specific event or something that, again, builds their brand. But I think the days of asking these creators to do everything for free need to be over. Like they are bringing so much value to the table in elevating your event or service in such a way that those days of, again, Wolfgang flying himself, nobody helping him. He's in the back of the bus. Again, those were some of those early days, but that needs to change, and we need to pay these creators and these individuals well. So there's a constant conversation around how do we build viable businesses? How do we, number one, provide an exceptional product or service to customers? But sometimes that means you have to pay a little bit more as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a conversation with a friend the other day who is working on like a problem. Basically, there's like this loneliness epidemic in the United States, and a lot of it's driven by like Uber Eats culture, right? Like it plays into just like the lack of sort of community and sort of just connection that people have. And I do think that's like a thing that like sure, over time it may be more efficient to get everything delivered, but like you're going to end up, it's going to be like we live in Wall-E and like we're all like by ourselves. And like and I think to your point just about like the economics of these restaurants and these bars, like there is a intangible benefit to these communities that people don't talk about. At least we don't hear people talking about it a lot. And so like I think you're touching on that point. I just think it really resonates. And the other thing that I had not thought about until you just said this was that like, and we talk a lot about tech. We talk about like screen time. Basically, like you can only make like in ad tech world, you can only extract as much value off of about the time you control. And to some extent, it's like people don't think about like going out in restaurants and bars as being part of their screen time. It's like that's like an actual like a viable way to spend your time. It's probably a much better use of time. And I don't think people like recognize that like how special that is because they kind of take it for granted.
I think what we've talked a lot about the loneliness epidemic. I think a lot of people have been talking about this. Scott Galloway talks about it like all the time on his podcast or on Pivot with Kara Swisher. But there is I think it's been amplified post COVID as well, where it's become so easy to stay at home. I mean, look at us right now. We're able to do this with the comfort of our own home. But I think there's something invaluable about getting together and being in community. And it's funny that you say that you all don't talk about it as much because that's really the through line of my show. It's all about community building, and it's all about highlighting individuals who I would say have affected culture in such a positive way. And I'll give you a few examples. We talked with Carlos Couturier, who owns Grupo Habita, the boutique hoteliers of Mexico. I asked him, I said, how do you know certain locations or communities are going to be that next place? It's like individuals who, again, like Jelena Group, who were in Venice before it was really hot and really interesting. And Carlos was in Puerto Escondido, in certain areas of Mexico City way before. But he said, you can always tell. He's like, there's always like an Italian coffee shop that opens up. Or he actually said, there's Israelis like the way in Santa Teresa in Costa Rica. You go to Santa Teresa, a lot of the business owners outside of also being Costa Rica, there's surf shops that are owned by Israeli people who came 20 years ago, or Italians or Spanish people that came and who kind of helped put foundational kind of flags in the ground that then the community kind of built from there. So that's why I talked earlier about these coffee shops or this bar, this amazing restaurant helps build these communities in a way that brings people together. And so, listen, we're all tribal people, man. Like we need each other. I've talked so much on my show about the need for us to be together, the need of that FaceTime, of that community, the need of touch. Like that's just so valuable in life, and you're not going to get that over a screen. And so that's why, as true community builders, I'm so in favor of hotels and restaurants and places like that bring us together and allow us to be in community. And frankly, it's just better for our health. We'll all be better people if we could spend some time together.
And hearing you talk about community, obviously I understand it personally from as a consumer, as somebody that like goes to these places and wants to enjoy and wants to feel like I'm part of that experience, truly kind of in that experience. But the other side of it that I don't think we've touched too much on is the brand side, because I do think there's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there's this community of brands also that want to elevate things. So you have, I know you've worked with some champagne brands with hotels, and then you talk about, there's a lot of olive oils and kind of Asian sauces that are elevating things. And all of these brands you're starting to see do more collaborations or start to work more closely together. And to me, it's almost like this community of folks that want to elevate the consumer experience, and they're now working together to make it 3 notches up instead of just one hotel that's a better experience. Is that what you're seeing in the space too, of brands starting to work together, and how are you working with brands to do that?
I think brands who are doing things right are building community, are providing value, a service, they're educating, they're entertaining, they're making our lives better in one way or another. The brands that I really vibe with are the ones that have similar values to me sometimes. And I think a lot of us, have that. Or as I've said before, it makes you feel good about yourself, or it makes you feel cool, or it's good for your health, or you know that it's bringing some sort of value. I think value creation is kind of one of the most important things. Is why am I going to engage with this brand? Why am I going to follow them? Why am I going to be a part of their tribe? Because that's ultimately what they're trying to do, is have you be a part. And the brands that are doing it, I think, really well and successfully are the ones that actually make you feel a part of something bigger than what you are ultimately. And that may be through, and that shows up in a lot of different ways. That may be through incredible content and storytelling via social media, short films, really unique and interesting experiences that happen, unique collaborations with influential individuals, that there's this cross pollination of each each respective brand's communities. And I think the brands that have tapped into that and really identified the right individuals to collaborate with, we've all seen really good collaborations and we've all seen really bad collaborations. And the good ones feel so real and so authentic and so like, yeah, of course they should be working together. And
Yeah.
so I think feeling a part of something bigger and really providing value is so important. And so many brands do it in multiple different ways. And I think brands are getting wildly creative about doing it with obviously social media and with the digital world. There's such an opportunity. I think we've already highlighted the fact that physical is so important. We need that. But I look at social media, I look at uh again, the metaverse and all places like this as an opportunity to continue to extend your brand, to promote and potentially capture a new audience. So I think the challenging thing for brands is, where do we play? Where and I think that's what I hear from a lot of my clients is, do we put effort and storytelling into this new platform? We spent so much time focused on these specific channels. Oh my gosh, we have another 4 channels that we have to look into. And oftentimes the big brands are the ones that can tackle all of those. But as these small brands, they have to sort of initially identify, why do they do what they do, and who is that customer that they want? Who is that, you know, initial individual who is going to be their mouthpiece, who's going to be that individual that's going to engage with the brand, not just once, but many times. And so, where do they live? And that might be in a physical space, that might be on Instagram, that might be on TikTok. But it's a constant conversation with brands every single day is, how do we continue to build our community? How do we continue to build our audience? How do we continue to extend our message and the value creation that we are bringing to the world? But what channels do we do that on? And ultimately, that is specific to each brand. There are certain brands, these B2B brands that I've seen over the last several years that have gone so hard on LinkedIn, but have not looked at anything else. And it's like, it makes sense because that's where their audience is. But there could be an opportunity for them to also explore other avenues. And I think they should constantly challenge themselves and to every year or every couple quarters and go, how do we continue to build on what we're building on? Where is our audience moving to? How do we backfill? There's so many legacy brands that I've worked for. You mentioned champagne. Some of these brands are a couple hundred years old. Okay, they have gone through many cycles of consumers, and it's like, how do you continue to service the current audience you have while also really thinking about that next generation? And I think that is a challenge that so many brands are grappling with and challenged with. Is we want to continue to be authentic and real to who our current audience is, but listen, that audience might be going away in the next 5 to 10 years. So how do we start peppering in and doing things that is going to bring this next generation? And that is exciting work that I get excited about because it's a challenge that's so fun to think about. And I can't sit here and say I know all the answers, but I love diving in and exploring and discovering those answers.
And when you have those conversations, have you found, this is actually something that like Daniel and I talk about a lot for our own, like for our startup, but like, do most brands really know who their like tribe is? Like, can they like identify, you're like, listen, like, just tell me who your real target audience is. Like who is that one person that's going to use this over and over again? Do they know it? Like, have they sat down and like really identified it and described it? Or they kind of know it in the ether, but like they really haven't forced themselves like to distill it down?
It's a good question. I think it depends on where the brand is in their life cycle and growth. I think you have these legacy brands who have a good understanding of who they are and have really good data to back that. Obviously, there's new data that's popping up every single day. I think when you look at some of these well-funded startups that have experienced tremendous growth, who we'll give an example, like a ready-to-bake cookie company, that's in Whole Foods or Safeway. They might, in the first several years, first 5-6 years, may not have a relationship with their customer because Whole Foods has the relationship, or Safeway, or Ralph's. And so they have identified who they want to be their audience. They have some data based on the individuals that are following them across their channels, but they don't have a direct relationship with that audience because they don't own that customer. So I think it really depends on what brands are we talking about. And so, Nike, I think, has a good understanding and a lot of data of who stays, plays, and engages with them. But you've got well-funded startups or not even startups, companies that have been around for 10 years that haven't necessarily owned that audience, that are now, since COVID, have developed their own D2C offering, that are just now really bringing in that data and that understanding and that learning and going, oh, wow, we thought this was our client, and it may very well be, but the person who are engaging with us or the 1,000 people who are on this reoccurring monthly, subscription are actually far different than we thought who they were going to be. And I think that's the evolution of a brand ultimately. So I hope I answered your question, but I think it really depends on the specifics of where that brand sits and lives in the world.
Are there brands that you come across, either working with directly or just kind of admiring from afar, that are doing this well and like you think are really leaning in properly?
I think there's lots of brands that are doing it well. I mean, that's a whole hour and a half to 2 hour podcast to list all the brands that are doing well. I'll mention one because I did an amazing episode with spirits innovator Fawn Weaver, the founder and CEO of Uncle Nearest, which is sort of what I would say a unicorn in the spirit space, which just has an evaluation of almost $1 billion now, only been around for 5-6 years, and just acquired a property in France to do cognac as well. The story behind it, I believe, is what propels this brand to create community at the level that it has and get people engaged in a way that they're so deeply passionate. Like, individuals are getting the brand tattooed on their arms. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but I'll briefly just give you a quick overview. Uncle Nearest Green, was the formerly enslaved man who taught Jack Daniels how to make whiskey. And ultimately, we know Jack Daniels has permeated culture globally on a scale that is tremendous. But this individual was sort of lost in history for a little while. And there's a lot of these individuals who become lost, sadly. And so Fawn ultimately read an article in the New York Times and did the deep dive and the due diligence of going, how is no one really talking about this individual? And why are we not celebrating this individual in the way that deserves to be celebrated? Just like, as they call him in Tennessee, Uncle Jack is. And so she went on this journey to develop this brand, which I would say has become such a culture innovator, change maker in the space, and has, diehard individuals who are motorcycle guys who have Jack Daniels on one arm, they have Uncle Nearest on the other. That level of fandom, as you can call it, that level of feeling a part of something bigger, of being a part of a community. And you can go to Shelbyville, Tennessee, and go to their brand home and learn about Uncle Nearest and listen to music and eat incredible barbecue. And that is the foot traffic they're getting there, and the people who are just die hard in love with this brand. It's what every brand wants. It's what every brand wants to do.
Yeah, I think it's like a story like that like I don't think can live and engage, outside of like food, beverage, hospitality. Like, you're not hearing that story in tech and people getting super excited to like download an app. Like, that just doesn't exist. So
listen, maybe they might, but yeah, these stories they're a part of our history as a country. They're a part of who we are. They're a part of why, again, without Nearest Green, we wouldn't have had Uncle Jack. And so we have to respect. We got to show respect for how these individuals have fundamentally changed culture.
Before we let you go, Gabriel, we want to hear like some of your favorite brands, some of the brands that you personally are excited about or just love. We won't ask if you have tattoos of them, but like just hearing those brands. And then as we wrap, like how can people learn more about you, learn more about some of these brands and some of the things that you're doing?
No, this has been fun, and as I said to you guys earlier, congrats. This is an awesome platform. For me, Uncle Nearest is one of those brands that really speaks to me, and honestly, I'm someone that's doing tastings multiple times a week with founders, but I'm actually drinking less now. So that's a health choice for me, but I also think there's a lot of people, and I talk to this on my podcast a lot with founders. I think a lot of individuals, maybe like myself, who understand very good quality, are maybe drinking a little bit less, but moving up in sort of the quality of the spirit. So I had Robert Furness Rowe on the podcast several years ago, former CEO of Bacardi, who created a company, a boutique spirits house that owns 7 brands called Samson and Surrey. And one of the brands that I had really engaged with for a long time is Ocho Tequila. I think what the family in Arandas, Jalisco is doing is absolutely phenomenal. There is an intention, there is a love, there is a passion. So I could sit here and name so many brands that I really believe have a deep passion and an authenticity behind what they're doing, and have not, for the money or anything, made the product any less better with more investment or anything like that. They have not changed who they are. They have not changed the love and the passion for ultimately the ingredients. And so there's a gentleman who I have on the podcast next week, Eduardo. He is from Italy, from Milan, and went to Sao Paulo. And he now has almost 200 gelaterias in Sao Paulo. It's called Bacio de Latte, Kiss of Milk in English. And he's opened up four gelaterias in Southern California. He has another 3 that's opening by the end of this year. They, with all the private equity investment, with all the success they have had, still source organic, still source the best dairy, the best ingredients. He's sourcing his pistachios from a specific region in Italy. These are brands that I really get behind. These are brands that I really get excited about. And I could sit here all day and tell you more of the brands, but I just feel so grateful that I get to connect with these founders. I get to break bread with them. I get to work with them in a lot of ways, but also just help share their story, because I believe the work that they're doing is meaningful. And we need brands like this. We need founders like this. And so I want to continue to amplify those individuals. And how you can connect with me, I love LinkedIn. I love connecting. So sometimes Daniel and I just talk on LinkedIn. We don't text each other. But I'm on Instagram. Gabriel M. Ornelas is my personal. If you want to follow the podcast, it's on the pass. ITS on the pass. PASS. The podcast is on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, all the typical places. Kind of trying to build YouTube. There's this whole movement of this younger audience who just I believe is listening on YouTube. I think YouTube is for you all and for other podcast and content creators. I think YouTube is still a behemoth, and there's a lot of opportunity for discovery on there. And there's this younger audience that spends a lot of time. So we're going to be throwing our hat in and doing some more on there. And yeah, if you ever want to chat or connect or talk food or talk beverage, or have an interesting guest that your audience thinks, you can go to you can email contact@onthepasspodcast.com and email me, or info@gabrielornelas.com. But I'm very reachable.
Yeah, we'll put all of that. We'll put all that in the show notes, and people can pick their path to get in touch. Yeah. But Gabriel, thank you so much for joining us today. We love hearing kind of passion come through the mic. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope it's valuable to you all, and I hope it's valuable to your audience. And this was a lot of fun.